So as I was getting ready for today's episode, I was thinking about the fact that this guy and I we managed to play music around Atlanta for many, many years, basically with the same people, and never played a gig with each other until, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And we finally did, and as I told him, it was absolutely worth the wait. And I'm happy to have my buddy, Mr. Mark Strickland, on the show today. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thanks for taking a little while to sit down and us talk about how much we hate playing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited about it. It's terrible. It's never any fun.
I'm glad we waited all those years. It was. I think the reason it was worth it is I owed you $50. I think it was there was money involved. So.
That's most likely what it was. Yeah. And our first gig, we can talk about all this later, but I think our first gig was at the Georgia, South Carolina rest area.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Big crowd.
Yeah, we got hired with Across the Wide to play a Welcome to Georgia event.
Yeah.
And all of these different travel destinations in the state of Georgia would set up booths, and we got hired by the Georgia Mountain Fair to play music for everyone that came in. So everyone that rolled in to go to the bathroom on their way to Atlanta walked in and was like, what in the world is a country band doing in the middle of this venue?
Yeah, in the lobby.
In the lobby of the rest area.
But they did get to see us twice, on the way to the bathroom and the way out of the bathroom. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we probably made some people need to go to the bathroom. And they're like, wow, listen to these guys. Yeah. So that was quite a first way to start playing together, but it was, like I said, it was worth the wait.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about your journey and what got you here. So the folks that are listening can't see what I'm seeing, but you have this beautiful drum kit behind you, and it looks like you have a studio that you're doing this from?
Yeah, I do online tracks, and I've got a studio here in Cartersville actually I rent space from a buddy of mine's studio called the After Dark Studio. He's been over here probably 20 years. Doing various, how it is for studio ownership. He does all acts, hip-hop acts, singer-songwriters, a cappella groups, gospel groups, rock groups, you name it. But yeah, I do online tracks, and I've got some various drums set up and all my recording kits and all that stuff. And don't tell Kelly I've got all this stuff over here. She doesn't. She didn't know half of the things that I've bought in the last little bit.
Yeah, well, luckily this is just audio only, all I see is one cymbal and one snare drum, Kelly. So that's all. That's all it is.
That's all I have. Yeah, that's all I have. Yes, I could do all the work with just that. Yes.
So, where were you born? Where were you raised?
I was raised in Ackworth. Back when I was a kid, Ackworth was literally a one red light town. And we watched it grow from that to what it is now. It seems like years ago, even when I was a teenager in the 80s, nobody really knew where Ackworth was at. It was on the map, and it was just on 75, just up from Atlanta, but it was such a small town and didn't really have a lot to offer. It's grown quite a bit now. But yeah, I spent all of my youth there. My father is from Ackworth. My mother's from Ackworth. 4 or 5 generations on both sides of that family.
Oh, wow,
yeah,
okay.
So.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have 2 older brothers, Larry and Scott, and they are
that's right.
much older than I am and not quite as handsome. I got all the looks, and you know how that goes.
Well, yeah, again, I'm glad this is an audio-only show.
Yeah, I got 2 older brothers, and they have kids of their own. They're a couple great-grandkids for my mother, and there's the family's grown quite a bit over the years. So yeah.
So, how did the music bug get to you? Were people doing it in your family? How did it come your way?
Purely accidental. My next closest to age to me, Larry, my brother Larry, he got married fairly young, I think at 18. But before he got married, he would sit in his bedroom and air drum with headphones on to whatever was the hit of the day. And the one that I remember the most was the Phil Collins song, In the Air Tonight. And that was his big moment to shine. You know, my brother would wait 3 minutes for that Phil to come around. And even to this day, I still look up to him as a major influence in my life. He's just a good man and a good father and a good grandfather. But even, back then, I totally sort of kind of wanted to be like him. He fished. I tried fishing. I tried all the things that he did. So I thought, well, I'll give this little drumming thing a shot. MTV was kind of out and it was happening, and you could see shots of drummers, and of course they looked cool to me. So I started doing the same thing, and then he moved out, and then I had to sort of learn all that on my own, and for some reason, almost 40 years into this, I can't figure out why, but I was able to keep the coordination with the hi-hat and the kick drum and the snare drum right out of the gate. I don't know how it happened. It just fell naturally to me.
That's awesome. So when did that stop working? The day we met?
The gig that we played, it was it was leading into that. Yeah,
that's it. I derailed that train the day we met.
Yes, you did. Yeah. Just when I thought I had it all together.
It's funny. I was an only child, but my mom's younger brother, Darren, he passed away about a year ago. He was like a big brother to me, and it was the same kind of thing. I started playing drums because he played me Rush albums when I was a kid. And I was like, what is this? Anything that he liked, I liked as well.
Yeah.
And I latched onto it. And it's amazing that the power of the influence of having an older sibling or an older relative that you look up to changes the course of your life.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like in the front of the house, in the kitchen area of the house, my mom, it seems like she always had a radio on. And it was always, I think it was WCHK in Canton, and it was old. Even back in the early 80s or late 70s, it was thought of as traditional country. It was Patsy Cline and Webb Pierce and Hank Williams, and it was all the stuff that we still love today. But that was sort of the front of the house. Mom and dad are church going Christian Baptist. In the back of the house, it was a different story. So 2 older brothers. One is 7 years older than me, so you can imagine what music, he was into Ted Nugent and Boston and ELO, as well as Hank Williams Jr. And, Charlie Daniels and all those early 80s country guys. So I had both of those. Kiss was a big one, too. We used to sit and stare at those albums. Man, what a life that would be.
Yeah.
But, I think just the long before I knew I wanted to be a musician, the various styles of music were seeping into my subconscious. They were formulating a plan, and that's partially what led me down this road that you're on as well, with playing in a rock cover band one night, and then doing Patsy Cline covers the next night, or somewhere in that. The genre switch is not that big of a deal because it's in our DNA, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, how many times have someone called up a song that you don't remember hearing for the last 25 years, and suddenly you're playing it and you're like, oh yeah, I remember every note of this because you listened to it 100 times in your bedroom when you were growing up. That's happened to me so many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a great asset to have for working musicians like us.
Yeah.
It's
right.
invaluable. I did a gig Sunday night for New Year's with a dance band that I hadn't played with in a year, and it was Good Times and We Are Family and La Freak and all those hits. The night before I was playing in Fort Payne, Alabama, and we played Freebird and Night Moves. And and the Fireman. But
variety is the spice of life, right?
Yeah. I love that. I love seeing other musicians get inside that and become the drummer that played on the Fireman, and then the next guy is Tony Thompson, who played with Good Times, he becomes that guy. I'm not so sure I'm good at it, but I enjoy the fact that other people are really good at it, and I strive to sort of, go down that path.
Well, I promise you are, and it's not a simple feat to take one hat off and put another one on, whether from one night to the next or from one song to the next, and be able to play one style and to do the style justice, right? It's one thing to play the style, but it's to play it the right way and then play something completely different the next tune or the next night, and then honor it the same way.
Yeah, I feel the same. Yeah.
When did you get your first piece of percussion equipment, snare drum or drum set or drumsticks? How old were you?
I was a late bloomer. I going back to air drumming in my bedroom, I thought I was ready. And a kid at high school, who I'll never forget his name, I don't know how to get in touch with him anymore, lost touch, named Gordon Triola. His dad at one time was a sub drummer for the Doobie Brothers. I don't know any more specifics other than that. So we were in homeroom together, and I mentioned air drumming or just, having an interest in drums. We didn't know where a music store was at. We didn't know, as far as my mom and dad, I didn't come from a music background. We didn't know how much a drum set cost, how heavy they were going to be to haul in at Smith's Old Bar.
Up those wonderful stairs in the back.
Up those steps. Yeah. Had I known those things, I would have chosen the flute. But no, I had it was no other instrument for me. I mean, that was going to be it. So I think, if I've got the timing right, it was probably the winter of 86. So yeah, I was a late bloomer. I mean, we went and got a Ludwig kit. My dad complained because the snare drum was a different color than the kit, which is typical. It was a chrome snare drum and sort of a Brandywine Ludwig 5-piece kit. And I thought, man, my first kit is going to be a Ludwig kit. I've made it. This is great.
That's pretty awesome that they entrusted you with it to set you on the path.
That's true. And the only reason I knew the name Ludwig is from magazines. And my buddy Gordon Triola, he had a Pearl kit that I knew the name Pearl and Ludwig, I guess, and probably saw it on MTV or something. I knew it was name brand, so when it was sitting in the showroom window, I thought, well, that's the kit for me. And my dad said, well, you can have them, but you got to pay me back $50 a week. And I was working, I was bagging groceries, so I said, yeah, absolutely. Oh, wait, I got to pay for the car payment and the insurance and now drums? Wow. If it wasn't for this money thing, we'd have it made. I mean,
yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So how long after that did you start playing with people?
About a year. I tried my best. I skipped school as often as possible, stayed home, and really just practiced to records. Trying my best to learn how to play along to records and stopping and starting and ending and that sort of thing. And I still, I'm still amazed at this, but I had no bearing. I had no anchor saying, Mark, you should get drum lessons. I think for the longest time I didn't really know that an education in drums and percussion existed. I obviously didn't know how to read music. It was all a feel thing. And so, yeah, but I practiced at home playing along to Huey Lewis records and the Outfield records and anything you could. AC/DC was one we had. Back in Black was one that I could sort of, find the pocket on. And so, yeah, about a year. And I found some old middle school buddies that I played baseball with growing up. And one of them played guitar. And said, come over, man, we'll play Barracuda. Little did I know about the time change in Barracuda that throws you. Oh, the other one was Holy Diver by Dio.
Wow.
He couldn't play it either. But he could play the riff to Barracuda, so he was a notch ahead of me. So
when did you play your first paying gig?
when is that gig we have with you coming up?
Oh, that's it.
Wait, they pay?
That's the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's later this year.
Yeah,
that's right.
I think the first paying gig, God knows I played a lot of not paying gigs. We used to play at the Rec Room, and this was fast forwarding probably into 1991 probably. And we played at the Rec Room quite a bit as a rock band. You know, we were late to the party with wanting to be in an 80s hair metal band, but we were young enough to look cool, but not hip enough to write really good songs and, you know, make that happen. But we played at the Rec Room in a couple places around Atlanta. But I think some of those gigs paid probably $15 or $20 a piece, and that was if you brought a bunch of people with you. You know how that goes.
Sure.
And that never really felt like making money. It was basically just a courteous thing, a gesture from the Rec Room saying, you know, here's your money, get out of here. We got another band coming on.
Right.
But we played. I think the first time I made $100 was, if I had to put a year on it, was probably 1995. And I thought, $100? What am I going to do with all this money? For playing music, you know?
For playing music, yeah.
We only had to rehearse 30 hours. We were backing up a bunch of singers in Jasper for some kind of country showdown or something. And, we only spent, you know, like I said, 30, 40 hours rehearsing with these singers and 10 hours the day before.
And then, once you divide up the mileage and the per hour of it, you're probably making, you know, 50 cents an hour, maybe, at best.
Yeah, at best, yeah. If you factor all that stuff in.
But at the same time, it's like, it didn't matter, right?
Oh, I mean, no, it didn't. That's why I had played, I don't know how many gigs, 150 gigs leading up to this $100. You know, that's why I made, the way I look at it, that's why I made $100 on that gig, is because I had played 100 or so gigs leading up to that, and I've put in the time, and I know how to show up to the rehearsal prepared. I know how to show up to the gig prepared, and I know all of these things. So I built this foundation is building, is the way I looked at it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing better than playing with people that show up prepared.
Yeah.
And I've always appreciated you'd always show up with charts. You'd listen to the tunes. When we first started playing together in Across the Wide, man, I know you spent a lot of time learning all those original tunes. It was awesome. I mean, you just walked in and did it. It was fantastic. So, tell me again, how long did you play at the Buckboard?
We were there for 2 years, but yeah, rounded off to 2 years. Okay. Yeah, 98 to the end of 2000 or so.
And how did you get into that band? How did you get in Peachtree Station?
I worked at Atlanta Pro Percussion after music school, and I was playing in a corporate band then, not Limelight. That came later, but I was wanting to get back into country because, you know, that whole thing we were talking about earlier with the genre switching and the you need this. You get your Patsy Cline and your Hank Williams Jr. fix for a while, and then you go, well, I think I want to play the Bee Gees for a while. So I started thinking, you know, I think I want to start back in a country band. Mm-hmm. Try that again. And lo and behold, that day I walked back to the board where they used to post ads for, you know, musicians wanted, and Alan Sanders, the guitar player in Peachtree Station, had just put up a flyer needing a drummer. And they had Scott and Alan and Keith, who were the main focal point of that band, were from Marietta, but a couple years prior, they had moved to Florida to do a house gig in Daytona. And when they moved back, their drummer decided to go to school and marry his sweetheart and stay in Daytona. And so when they moved up here, they needed a drummer, and they found me and did a couple rehearsals with them, a couple gigs. and they said, "Hey man, have you ever heard of the Buckboard?" And I said, "Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't." At the time, I didn't know much about it, other than it was, legendary nightclub for some country artist.
Right.
They said, "Well, we have a chance to be the house band there 3 nights a week. Would you be interested?" Yeah, a couple $100 a week playing music every week. Yeah. So in October the 1st, I think we did a couple of showcases for John, and he was sort of the house band that had been there with Art Hogue and Chuck Heitzman and Toby, if you remember Toby.
Toby Rucker.
Yep. Those guys had been there for years. I think Chuck had been there for 20 years when he was finally out. But that was a long out for them. He had to softly let them go over time, and they were ready to go. I think it was an easy transition. So, we officially started there as the house band 3 nights a week in, I think it was first week of October of '98. And I'd only been in Peachtree Station for 3 months, and I thought those guys were pretty good players, and everybody's cool, easy to hang with. That's a
and
lot.
you guys played together for a long time, didn't you? Not as a band, not necessarily just at the Buckboard, but you played together for quite a while, right?
We still play together. Scott and I and Keith have a band called Brother Mojo with two other guys that have been lifelong friends that we've known for 20 years, that are from probably the Cedartown side of Georgia. Dave Harper and Shannon Wilson, who Shannon Wilson is actually playing in Across the Wide with us now.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Funny how things
move
around and shake.
Yeah.
So, but Peachtree Station, we played the Buckboard, and when the Buckboard ended is when I took the corporate gig with the Event Performance family, with Limelight. But Peachtree Station was just like we do. If you've got a hole in your schedule, and somebody calls, you take the gig. So Peachtree Station continued on through my days with the corporate band and that sort of thing. So,
well, and I think you guys were doing what I was doing as well back in the early 2000s. I was playing. I would play 2 or 3 times a weekend playing these radio remotes for the country radio stations. Weren't you guys doing that too?
Yeah, we did a lot of those.
Man, we were so busy with Kicks and Eagle at that time, playing all those cell phone stores and car dealerships. And what was cool about it is that you could go play a gig at 11 in the morning and then go play a gig that night.
Yeah.
So it was easy to do a double. There were a few times where we would do 3 gigs in a day. We'd do 2 radio remotes and then go play a gig that night.
Wow. Who were you playing with then? Remote?
It was with this band called Timeless Highway. It was with Tommy Dodd on steel guitar and Mike Johnson on electric guitar. And Kevin Albertson played drums for a while, and then a guy named John Basler played drums. He started in '01 until we stopped playing together. But we were busy. I know you guys were too.
We certainly played a lot of those remotes, those radio remotes with Moby and Rhubarb and whatever, a number of DJs.
Yeah.
Speaking of Timeless Highway, you bring that up. We did a gig with you guys at Centennial Olympic Park. I'm not sure what the event was. I'm not sure if you guys played before or after us. But we knew you, but not the other guys.
Was Colin Ray on that gig? And I know that because years later played with Colin's keyboard player a lot, Gene Lesage, and I'm pretty sure he was on that gig too.
So he would have been the headliner. We were maybe setting up for the, not really opening act, but we were the daytime acts for a later. I think we did open for. We'll call it open.
I want to say it was Colin and maybe I think Kenny Rogers was on that gig, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I feel like, they all run together after a while. I'm pretty sure Kenny Rogers was on that gig.
That would be. I don't remember that. Maybe I didn't stick around. That'd be something to see. I have a funny Kenny Rogers story that ties into the Buckboard and me and Scott and Alan and the Peachtree Station guys. So John came to us one day and says, "Hey, Kenny Rogers is going to play at the Buckboard, whatever day of the week this is. He needs." I don't remember how he phrased it, but something along the lines of, would you guys dress the part, corporate attire, business like, and sort of hang out in front of the stage during the performance as a buffer, like security-wise, or not really security. It was odd. But God, he sounded good.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it sounded, and it was the Buckboard of all places. It's super small.
That's a small place,
yes.
And he had his band with him.
Yes, the full band. Yes,
he had a great band. I think I opened for him 3 times.
Wow.
And every time he was one of those acts where every song you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. He had so many great songs.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah, that voice, man.
Yeah, I played. I think I opened. We were the house band for the. Do you remember the Colgate Country Showcase? Do you remember those gigs?
I heard about. I don't know if I ever did one, but I've heard about them.
We were the house band for all the people that competed in that thing, and it was with. Kenny Rogers was the headliner that night.
Where did they host that?
That was at the Horse Park out in Conyers.
Yeah.
That was a good. It was us with. So we did a set, and then we did the competition, and then Patty Loveless played, and then Kenny Rogers played.
Wow. Well, I wanted to ask you something. It totally. Well, and this is maybe taking a left-hand turn, but something that's been on my mind all day is, tell me about, you did a thing with Star Search when you were young.
Young.
Speak on that because I don't know a lot of. I just heard, hey, Brad was on the Star Search.
My parents were divorced. I was at my dad's for the weekend. I was watching TV one Saturday morning, and there was a commercial that said, Atlanta will be hosting a regional Star Search audition. If you're interested, send a tape to. And I grabbed a pen and a piece of paper and wrote it down. And prior to that, I was 12 years old at the time. When I was 11, I went to Nashville, recorded an album with all Nashville players on it. It's really good, except for the little kid singing. But we sent a tune on there, and they called back and said, you've been invited to the live audition. So went down to Greenbrier Mall. They had the live audition. It was kind of a setup in the round, and you had to stand on the stage and sing. And the mall was completely, I felt like, Debbie Gibson or something,
Tiffany.
Like Tiffany. The mall was full of people, and I sang Johnny Be Good, and wound up winning that competition. So I won the Atlanta competition. The next week, I had to go to a studio in Atlanta and film myself singing it.
Ooh.
And then I didn't hear about it for months. Kind of life moved on, didn't think anything about it. And then lo and behold, I got home from school. My mom called and said, hey, the whole family's going out for dinner tonight. Make sure you're ready. So we all sit down at the restaurant. My mom said, hey, I wanted to let you know I got a call today from California. You've been invited to be on Star Search. And, I about fell on the floor. So I was 12 years old.
Man.
Went to Hollywood, did the rehearsals, did the episode, lost, and turned 13 the next day when I flew back to Georgia. My 13th birthday was spent flying from L.A. to Atlanta. But
teenage loser.
That's it. That's basically it. But as you can imagine, and look, I grew up in Alpharetta, and like you were saying with Ackworth, I mean, Alpharetta was a small town back then.
Yeah.
It's certainly not like it is now. And they had Brad Williams Day in Alpharetta before I went to California. Like the Channel 2 news came, that it was in the newspaper. I remember, like, I had to go and sing for the Board of Education for where I went to school. It was this big deal. And then came back, and then it aired in March. And it was the one and only time I went somewhere later that night, and this woman walked up to me and she said, "Did I see you on Star Search last night?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me." It was like, yeah, it was the one time I kind of felt like I felt important, and that was it. Oh, but I lost. So the guy who beat me wound up winning the whole thing. He was he sang all those early Michael Jackson 5 things. He was incredible. And he wound up winning the entire season. I was on the same season as Christina Aguilera, and he beat her as well. Wow. But it was such a cool experience. I remember right before I walked out on stage, the stage manager said to me, he leaned over and he was like, "Don't be nervous. Only about 2 million people are going to see this." and I'm a little kid, but I'm thinking, that's. I was terrified. Yeah. But it was a really, really cool experience. I
bet. Yeah.
Yeah. You should see it. As I was the same height as I am now.
I'll look it up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna do a side-by-side comparison.
Yeah, I now have gray hair and no mullet. Yeah. That's the only difference.
Oh, the mullet. And what year was this?
That would have been 1989.
89.
Yeah. So it was a crazy experience. It was really crazy.
I would imagine you were a much better singer in 89 than I was a drummer in 89.
I don't know, man.
Unfortunately, there is evidence, and so for Christmas, I asked for this year. So I asked for a conversion kit, basically to get VHS to digital. So I spent Sunday evening transferring some old VHS tapes from 1988, 89. I think there's one from 87 where I house stuff, It goes way. So, God, I was terrible. I had no anchor of what groove is, much, time, where's the one, a bar, dynamics, rhythm. Did I mention timing? All those things that don't, that I still don't have. I'm working toward it though. Yeah.
It's fun to go back and watch those things. If you can remove yourself from it and it's actually a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. I need to watch it several times to get there to the removal part. That's the hard part. But I see what you're saying though, and I totally agree that it regardless how far you've come, if you've made it to the mountaintop or just the ledge on the side, you can take stock in how far you've come. Nobody's calling me up to be a modern drummer, but you look back on 30 some odd years of doing what we do, and you've got to sort of pat yourself on the back occasionally and say, hey man, you keep going. You've come a long ways. You're proud of yourself. Pat yourself on the back and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, I hope that you upload some of those videos to YouTube.
Oh God, no!
And please share them with me. I'd like to see it. Look, I've taken a lot of videos and uploaded them all to YouTube, but they're all private. Just so that if I ever need them or want to share them with anyone, I can change it to unlisted and then share them out and people can see them. But yeah, it's great. I've done this. I've done the same thing. I've found a bunch of demos that I'd played on or bands that I'd played in, and I've gone and kind of ripped a lot of those CDs to MP3 format and have gone back and listened to it, and have been recently sending a few tracks around to some people I played with on it. And it's really fun to just go back and you even think about that period of your life of, it's not just a time capsule of the music part of it. You think about where you were in your life at that moment. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
to do it.
Yep, I agree with that completely.
Change the rules we've broken. Wake up, the time for dreaming's over. Morning has spoken.
So I want to go back. You mentioned music school earlier. Tell me about where you studied and who'd you study with and what were you studying?
Let's see. I guess there's two components to that, one being music school. But before music school, there was private lessons with a teacher at Ken Stanton. His name was Martin Abbott. He taught at Ken Stanton for many, many years. I had a desire to learn to read music, not just drum music. I really wanted to learn to read music. I bought a book called Learn to Read Music and got some of the fundamentals down, but I knew that wasn't going to be enough. I started taking music lessons, drum lessons from Martin, and I could play a little bit. I was already in bands and we were gigging and this kind of thing. And this was probably going back to 92 or 93. And Martin, I've got this thing on my studio wall that I'm looking at right now. He wrote it on the back of a spiral notebook, how the note values work. Whole note, half note, all that stuff. And I framed it many, many years ago. He taught me that and some time modulation stuff, 12/8. I knew to play it, how to play it, but I didn't know why it made sense, against a 4/4 time signature, how it all sort of laid together. I think out of the year's worth of lessons that I took with him, we probably actually played drums about 4 hours out of all of those lessons. A lot of it was how to treat your fellow musicians on a gig and how to show up on time and how to be prepared and how to learn songs. It wasn't about chart reading yet, but it was about learning songs and being prepared and being a responsible, dependable working musician. And I mean, that was that, and reading music was the biggest lessons I got out of that. So fast forward to about 98, I started at, is that right? 96, I'm sorry. January 96, I started at Atlanta Institute of Music. And Craig Harbor, who you know, and Chip Lunsford were the two drum instructors there. And man, I didn't. There was a lot of classes. There was a lot of jazz. There was a lot of Latin playing. There was a lot of time signatures, odd meter stuff, a lot of ear training stuff. Failed all of that miserably. But the one thing that I took from that, it's a 1-year program, but I had to go 2 years because I had to half load everything because I had a full-time job and all that stuff. So the biggest thing I got from that was charting, was how to chart a song. And man, 25 years later, I'm still using the methods that Craig Harbor gave me. And I had a chance, the picture that I sent you earlier today with me and Craig, he came out to a gig that I was playing with Michael Watson, who you know. Mm-hmm. I think you know Tony that plays keyboards with him a lot. Craig was filling in for me that weekend. So how intimidating is that when your drum instructor shows up to study your playing on good times? How does Mark end it? What not to do? And this was probably not too long ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And I got a chance to tell Craig. I showed him some charts, and I was like, look what you've done for me. And, he may get that from every graduate from the school. But he means the world to me, man. I mean, he's a
special guy.
He is.
I've played through Michael and Andy Martin.
Andy, yeah.
I'm sure you know. I've subbed on a lot of oldies gigs with them and played next to Craig, and he can play everything and play it really well. Yeah.
And smile while he's doing it.
And that's it. He's just that. For everything he can do musically, the hang with him is 50 times better.
Indeed.
He's just a sweet guy.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I lived, early on when I was in music school, I lived in Ackworth, and the school was in Norcross, as you know, probably an hour drive or so. And he lived in Marietta, East Cobb. I locked my keys in my car one night, and he happened to be leaving. It was only me and him in the parking lot. Otherwise, I was stranded and have to call my dad to come get me. So he said, "Hey, man, what's the problem?" And I said, "Well, I'm an idiot. Locked the keys in the car." So we tried for a few minutes and couldn't get the car unlocked or the windows down or anything. So he said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Ackworth." He said, "Well, hop in. I'll take you home." Just like that. Didn't hesitate. And I'll remember that until I'm long and gone, man. I mean, he's that kind of guy, you know. So he called me probably, I don't know how many months after that, and says, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, it's a Saturday. I don't have a gig because I'm I'm not good enough yet. I don't pay gigs." So he said, "Would you mind helping me move today?" Absolutely. You return favors, and Craig he's that to me. Oh.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart.
Yes, indeed. Atlanta Institute of Music is much bigger now, but at the time it was they had a drum program and a guitar program and a bass program. There was no vocal programs. There was no recording program like there is now. So it was basically, Latin. There was a Latin class for each semester had a Latin class, a performance class that you always played with a different guitar player and different bass player. Started out with Johnny B. Good, and I think it ended at somewhere around Hot for Teacher. And you can imagine, and there was a jazz performance class as well that starts with standard jazz stuff that moves into the samba stuff. And, this stuff is moving pretty fast, and they let you know that even though this is fast-paced stuff, it's going to sink. If you apply yourself, it will sink in over time. And it might be after you get out of school. I'm certainly not a jazz player, but if somebody calls one, I can fake it. I'm not going to go to, Sambuca and impress anybody, but you know what I mean, though, because I knew where my strongest asset was, and it wasn't jazz. That wasn't my thing, but just having the little fundamentals of being able to be comfortable on a gig if somebody calls out a jazz standard.
And that's just like as we were talking a few minutes ago, just like you hearing those tunes in your house growing up, you soaked all that information in that you've managed to utilize from then on as a working musician, which is so cool. Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
I just know a lot of people who've come through that program at AIM, and Craig, and then of course Tom Knight, who's another terrible drummer that's just, hopefully someday he'll figure out how to play.
Yeah,
he's so good, man.
Yeah. He was, I think, the first time I heard about him, there was a CD maybe or a cassette tape going around the school that was Tom playing basically a drum cover of Tom Sawyer. I'm not sure how the specifics of how the recording went, and you could tell it wasn't the original version, but it was pretty close. And it was like, who's this Tom Knight guy? Oh, he's the new teacher for the level 3 performance class. He'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
And man, did he.
Did he? Yeah, I started playing at a church in Atlanta a couple years before we moved. Tom was playing drums on it. I remember just the first tune I played with him. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's like taking your groove in for a tune-up. It's like you don't ever have to be concerned about where the pocket is because he's got it.
Yes.
It's right there.
Yeah.
Just a great player.
He played a thing it was at I think it was at a Borders bookstore around the corner from the music school. And it was him and Randy Hexter who was also an instructor at AIM, and Carl Culpepper, I think, was on the gig. Basically a bunch of teachers from school. You know, for a kid that grew up listening to Hank Williams Jr. and you know, ELO, what is this? I like it, but what is it? And then that was my introduction to who Dave Weckl was, and the whole, you know, connection with Dave and Tom Knight, how he was, you know, sort of a, you know, totally influenced by Weckl and all that stuff. So I left that bookstore and bought the biography on Steely Dan, because I'd always heard about Steely Dan and knew the Jeff Porcaro connection, and, you know, and then as I'm reading Steely Dan changed my life, you know, especially after reading the book. You know, you sort of kind of know the music, but you don't know the magnitude of all the players that played on. Everybody that contributed to that stuff became my heroes. Jim Keltner, you know, Jim Gordon,
Jim Gordon,
you know, Porcaro, Bernard Purdy, yeah, Rick Marotta. I mean, there's a couple of names. There's Jim Hodder, I think, was the original drummer that played on the first 2 records, I think. I mean, it's insane how good that stuff is.
It is. It's just songwriting, performing, and production on another level.
Yes, yeah. Do you like the later stuff with Keith Carlock playing on it?
I like basically anything that Keith Carlock plays drums on.
Yeah.
I've gone to see him with Steely Dan a couple of times and just was completely blown away. And then Skylar and I, when we lived in Atlanta, we drove to Nashville one afternoon to go to 3rd and Lindsley because Keith was playing with Michael Rhodes, Brent Mason, Oz Noy. I can't remember who else. And I had Paul Franklin was sitting at the table on this side, and Reese Winans, who played with Stevie Ray Vaughan, was sitting at this table. The whole room was full of musicians that came to hear this, and it was just an experience that I will always remember. And Skylar, I think he may have been in middle school at the time, but he was already hip to Keith's playing. Skylar got a picture with him afterwards, and he was just completely starstruck meeting Keith Carlock. I think he came into the band and honored everything that happened before him, but just changed it and added this new level of energy behind it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel about his playing with the band?
I like it. I started that with a negative and didn't. I'm talking about Steely Dan, so that's very difficult for me to do. But I didn't fall in love with the later Steely Dan stuff. What was Two Against Nature, and there's a second one.
Everything Must Go.
Everything Must Go. Didn't love them, didn't hate them, but it was a different. I think it was a different production. It's hard to say. You know, that's not to say that I don't like Gaucho and, you know, the later stuff from the late 70s, 80s. But, it was just, I don't know. It's hard to say, pinpoint exactly what it is. I love Donald Fagen's voice. Not that. Still Steely Dan. It's still those chord changes that we love.
It's still those changes. It's
something about it. Just
still that keyboard sound. Yeah,
it didn't hit
still
me.
Those amazing guitar solos, right?
Yep. Keith Carlock came up to Berry College when we lived in Rome 3-4 years ago and did a performance with the school band. And I heard about it. It was kind of one of those things where you hear about it the day of. It's kind of like when you hear that with let's say Steely Dan's playing at Smith's Old Bar, but they changed their name to
right.
You know, Dog Pound or something. You know, and only 3 people know about it. Only the important people know about it. You know, well. Evidently, I was important that night because me and my buddy Sean and another guy went, and there was maybe 20 other people in the auditorium, and they played. He played with the school band. I think he was friends with, and you may know the horn player, who's the music director at Berry.
Is it Sam Skelton?
Yes,
maybe.
Yes, yeah. That's
okay.
And
yep.
I may have his title wrong. Maybe that's not his. Maybe he's not affiliated with Berry, but he was. It was because of him that Carlock was there that night, and he played with them as well. So
Here's my Keith Carlock story. I was going to play a gig one night and was going to miss his performance at the Velvet Note in Alpharetta. Him, Tim LaFabe, and Wayne Krantz were playing at the Velvet Note. Skylar was coming with me to my gig. My big thing with Skylar through the years is I like to get drum heads signed for him. He has a bunch of them. So I got on Keith's website and sent a message and was like, hey, I'm not sure if you could get the message to Keith. I have a gig. I want to get a drum head signed for my son. I was wondering if I might be able to stop by during sound check and let my son say hello to you. He met you in Nashville years ago. Within 5 minutes, I get an email back from Keith that said, hey, absolutely, we'll be there at such and such time. Come on by. If someone's at the door, ask them to let you in. We walked through the door. He knew who we were. Skylar at that point was thinking about going to North Texas, so they talked about North Texas a little bit. He signed a drumhead, spent some time with him. Wayne Krantz was dialing in his settings, and I was so mesmerized watching him play guitar. Yeah. Keith was a complete sweetheart to Skylar. He didn't have to do any of that, but he did. And to me, that just showed me everything I needed to know about him. It was awesome.
Yeah, to me, it's because of people like that inspire. How old was your son at the time?
He was probably 17.
Yeah,
17, somewhere around there.
And look what that that may have steered him down a path.
Sure.
If nothing else, it steered him down a path of just being cool and being nice and being friendly to people. Keith Carlock at the time was probably a name artist. He could have easily said no, not replied to the email or ignored you altogether.
I mean, at this point, he had toured with James Taylor, Steely Dan, John Mayer, Sting. I mean, he had done all those gigs, and was just like, yeah, come on by.
Yeah,
he didn't have to, but he did. It was just, I don't know, man. It was just a really cool. Yeah. It was a cool moment.
I heard about him through Chris Blackwell, who I'm sure you know, just from being around town for so many years.
I've played many, many, many gigs with him over the years. Yeah, I love him to death.
I met Chris. I later played with Chris at Cowboys, but I met Chris on a gig with Peachtree Station. At the time, we were in between guitar players and just subbing it out to guys. We played downtown Marietta on the stage that they have set up. For a radio station, big event. I don't think it was 4th of July, but it was one of those expecting a big crowd. So we ran through sound check, and we're like, who the crap is this guy? So we do sound check, everything's set up, ready to go. We go over to, I think, Hemingway's to have a bite to eat before the gig. And it comes this torrential downpour, thunderstorm, lightning hitting everywhere. And Chris is literally under the table. I don't know if you know that he is terrified of thunderstorms. So he is under the table. And we just met the guy. I think Scott got his number from who knows who, Lance Price or somebody. So Chris is under the table. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And it was funny, but it was also like worrisome. It's like, we don't know the guy. Is he going to freak out? Is he just out of prison? We don't know. So the gig didn't happen because of the thunderstorm. We got paid really well. And I think to this day, Chris always says that was the best gig he's never played. Whether there was a thunderstorm or not. So that was my first introduction to Chris, and then I got to know him a couple years, various gigs like that, subbing out for work and stuff. So
yeah, I can't remember how I met Chris, but played a bunch of gigs with him over the years in a million different configurations, and just I mean, he was incredible from the beginning, but to watch what he has just become over the year, I mean, it's incredible. He could go play anywhere and just blow people away. I mean, he is just so good. I think I haven't seen him in a while. I went and sat in with Mike Veal one night and just couldn't get over how well he's playing with that band. Yeah, he's just so good.
Yeah, that's right up his alley too.
Yeah. So when did you get the gig at Cowboys?
Let's see, 2000 and spring or so of 2005. I was living in Nashville at the time. The gig at Cowboys sort of came around sort of funny. I had filled in a couple of times with a college band called Trotline, who were out of...
Yeah.
Do you know those guys?
I know of that band.
Yeah. And I've done a few gigs with them. And Jay Johnson, who is from Cowboys and later came back to Cowboys, was playing in that band at the time. So I played a bunch of gigs with them. Their drummer left. I was living in Nashville. They called me and said, hey, do you want the gig with Trotline? We need a drummer to fill in, to start immediately. We play every weekend. We'll, you keep, food in your stomach, and you'll be on the road, and you'll have plenty of money. And I was like, man, I don't want to be going from Nashville that long. I'm already playing in a corporate band in Atlanta and traveling to Atlanta almost every weekend. Because as you know, the gigs on Broadway and Nashville gigs don't pay that much anyway. I needed the corporate gig in Atlanta to pay some of the bills,
Sure.
So long story short is I turned down the Trotline gig. The very next day, I'm moving into an apartment with a friend of mine. I get a phone call from Chris Blackwell. He says, hey man, this is Chris. And we, talked a few minutes, and he said, well, I'm the band leader at Cowboys. We need a drummer starting this weekend. Gary has left to play with some kind of college outfit called Trotline. so one gig leads to another sort of thing, or not taking one gig leads to another.
Right.
So I said, well, I'll commit to 2 weekends. I can't take it full time because I don't want to be gone from Nashville that long, 3 nights every week. I'll do it for 2 weeks and give you time at least to. So I learned all their set and showed up to rehearsal. I think we did a Wednesday night rehearsal and then a Thursday afternoon rehearsal, and off to the races. There we went. So after the first weekend, I pulled Chris aside. I said, you know what? I've reconsidered this. I think I will take the gig if it's still open. My mom lives in Ackworth, just down the street. I can stay with her on nights that I play here and just commute back and forth. So that worked out for about a year until it burnout set in from driving back and forth So then I had to make the decision on stay in Nashville or move back to town, Georgia, and keep that gig. So I moved back.
Did you move to Nashville were you going to go up there and try to land a gig, a road gig? Were you wanting to do session stuff? What were you hoping to get out of that?
Yeah, I moved up there with the intention of doing a road gig. And really just, I'm not married at the time. I don't have any kids. I don't own a house. There's nothing tying me down. Why not?
Yeah, sure.
The only thing that was potentially holding me down was I had a full-time job with IBM that was, the pay was great, benefits great. So I thought about it for about 30 seconds. And I said, well, that's not what I'm wanting to do anyway. Let's just dive in the deep end and see what happens. It's close enough to home. I can still do gigs at home, either with Peachtree Station or Scott acoustic gigs, duo gigs, or the corporate band I was still in. They were like, yep, go do it. See you on Saturdays at the Waverly or, at the Westin. And so, yeah, it worked out for a pretty good while. Played on Broadway a lot, played a lot of travel gigs with some bands around town. Was very fortunate when I moved to town. I met a guy on let's say a Wednesday night and had a gig that Saturday night and didn't stop working the whole time I was there.
Wow.
It just fell in your lap. While you go to a bar and hang out and have a beer with somebody you don't know, they mightn't be a musician or they might know a musician, which is what happened to me. Yeah. That guy wasn't, but he was friends with the singer in the band that was playing that night.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Boy, as we're talking about how Ackworth and Alpharetta felt like small towns when we were growing up, Nashville felt like a small town compared to what it is now. It's incredible to me how much it's grown, and when we drive from St. Louis to Atlanta, the traffic that we hit going through Nashville is unbelievable.
That's what I keep hearing from people that I know, and people still play up there. That's the report I get. It's traffic, and Broadway is like Vegas these days, from what I hear.
It's like I think I heard that over 100 people a week are moving to Nashville.
Nuts.
Which, that is nuts.
And 99 of them are musicians, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Or singers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So who all was in the band at Cowboys while you were playing there?
Let's see. When I first started, it was Jeff Brewer was playing bass. Jeff Brewer, Chris Blackwell, Tim Hamilton, of course. Lisa Biddy was singing. Cody Collins was the guy singer. And then Bobby Mobley played with us. I'm sorry.
Cool.
Let me back up. Jeff Williams was there he was there about 2 weeks after I started, and he was out. And then Jeff Brewer was out probably a month or so into maybe I probably ran him off. I don't know.
No.
Jeff Williams was there for a while, and then Bobby Mobley played there he was probably there the longest of those keyboard player guys. Jay Johnson came back into the fold after Jeff Brewer left. Chris left at some point, and Mike Hines was...
Mike Hines.
He seems like he was always there. Even though Chris was there, Mike was almost always there, and when Chris left, it seems like Mike sort of filled that spot, and he was a great asset to Cowboys for sure. Miss Mike.
That's a great... I mean, everyone you've named, all great players.
Yeah, there's
great
some good players up there, and just like all things, it ran its course, I guess, for all those guys.
I played a ton of gigs with Bobby Mobley over the years. Love him to death, and love Jeff Brewer to death. Chris, of course, that we talked about, and Jay Johnson. And I can't say enough nice things about Jay. He's just a great guy. I love him.
Yeah. So here's a funny story with Jay, and I'm like you. I love him. He's a true brother. So after I think 2.5 years or so, they were cleaning house, and I was unfortunate. They let me go. Of course, Jay was the band leader at the time, and Jay had to break the news to me, and I didn't say anything out of hand or inappropriate to him, but I think he perceived whatever I said as a blow to him, which it never was. It probably came out with, piss and vinegar or whatever, you know what I mean? You get fired from anything, but I didn't talk to Jay not because we weren't on speaking terms. There was no reason to talk to him. He had a house gig. I didn't go to, so I didn't talk to him probably for a year. So one day out of the blue, I said, I'm going to call Jay, see what he's doing. We're friends, we're pals. So I called him up. He's like, hello, are you mad at me? Are you around the corner? Are you going to step? And I was like, no, Jay, I've never had any ill feelings toward you. He's like, okay, yeah, whatever. So within about 3 days, there was a guy from Macon, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he used to play at Southern Comfort in the South Side a lot. Singer, guitar player, and you probably...
Is he friends with Chris?
Yes, probably.
Is it Wesley Robinson?
It's Wes's counterpart. Buddy that... Oh, what's his name? Buddy in the same family as Wes Robinson and that whole group of guys. So that guy used to use me a lot on some gigs down in Macon. So a couple of days after I had called Jay out of the blue, the guy calls me and says, hey, can you find me a bass player? I said, yeah, I'll call. I know who exactly to call. Fresh on my mind. So I called Jay. He said, yeah, I'll do it. And I said, cool, I'll drive. So we get almost to Macon, and he starts asking me about the Cowboys stuff, and I tried to reassure him that there were no hard feelings at all. So we do the gig, and we decided to get a room that night. And by now it's 2 a.m., you know how that goes. So his wife calls, and she says, did Mark take you down there just to dump you in a ditch somewhere?
my plan is coming to fruition.
She was a little
that's so
skeptical.
funny.
She was a little skeptical of what this whole, Friday night thing is all about down in Macon.
Yeah.
And, you're riding with the enemy.
It is funny. You call him out of the blue, and then call him about a gig, and then suddenly the gig turns into an overnight thing. Yeah, she probably thought that you were. He's not coming home.
Yeah, wouldn't you think that? I would. Yeah, I guess if he could have just drove.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, the gig didn't pay that much. I don't know.
I think, and my memory may not be correct on this, but I believe that you and I may have played drums in the same band for a little bit. Did you play some? He had a band called Blue Denim. Did you play any in that band?
Yeah, with Jay. Yeah.
And Michael Watson.
Yep.
I played. I could have been subbing for you on some gigs. I played a handful of gigs on drums with them.
I was probably subbing for you, subbing for me, and on it goes. The first time I met Michael Watson, oddly enough, back to that Strickland, the college band that I turned down for the Cowboys gig, the band leader of Kenny Strickland, but no relation. Kenny hired Jay to put together a corporate band to do some weddings and stuff. I'm not sure how Michael Watson got brought into this, but we went to do a rehearsal at Michael's place, and your name pops up. It's like, holy shit! How do you know Brad? And I mean, how does this whole 6 degrees of how does this all connect? We're all connected somehow. How do you know him? Yeah. Tell me the story of how you know Michael, because I don't know if he ever, Michael. I'm not sure if he ever clearly explained how he knows you.
I played drums at a church in Duluth with Andy Martin on bass. Steve Cunningham was the guitar player. I'm trying to think. Louis Stefanel played percussion. Larry Jackson played sax. Great band. When Steve would be out of town, Andy would get Michael to come and sub on guitar.
Because I think Michael and Andy have been playing together for many, many years.
What was funny was that I played drums in that band, but when Andy had to miss, there was a guy that went to church there that played drums, so he would play, and then I would play bass to sub for Andy. So Andy would hire me to sub for him, or he would hire me to play drums on their gigs.
I see.
And so they had some corporate gigs that they would do, and weddings and stuff like that, and I would always. That's how I really got in with Michael and started playing with him.
I see.
And just think the world of him. He's so funny.
Yeah. He still does a Wednesday night gig out at Guston's in Woodstock. I don't know if you've played that place. It's been Guston's for a long time, but it was...
I played there when it was the Firehouse.
Yes. First time I played there, it was the Firehouse, too. So Michael, probably 4 or 5 years ago, called me and says, hey, we've got a house gig on Wednesday night. We've got a full-time drummer, but he's not going to be here for a year. Do you want a year's worth of Wednesday night gigs? But yes. Playing Saturday in the park and, a bunch of cool stuff. They had a singer that sort of leaned toward the yacht rock thing before it was sort of becoming popular. But they were doing Reeling in the Years. You had me at Reeling in the Years.
That's it.
They did 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. That's no easy feat. Even if fake it till you make it kind of thing, it's tricky.
Yeah. Every drummer's sound check riff.
I've never done that. Yeah, Michael Watson. Jay, Michael Watson, Blue Denim, absolutely filled in for you. And you filled it. I'm not sure who was the drummer in that band.
Well, what's funny, so I did that, and then a bunch of gigs later. I mean, Michael used to call me for all kinds of stuff. I remember one time he called me and was like, hey, our lead singer's not going to be able to be at the gig. Can you come and sing? I don't need you to play anything. I just need you to front the band. I'm like, okay. I showed up with a microphone and a cable and a stand. And that's all I did. That stood there and sang all night, which was a lot of fun. But what was really cool was that when we moved to Louisiana, Michael called me one day and said, hey, listen, I am playing in this band, this corporate band, and we're getting a bunch of work in Louisiana. Would you want to play with us? So first gig I played bass with them, and then their drummer left, and then I started playing drums every time they had a gig. They would drive from Atlanta to Louisiana to play. We had a blast.
Yeah.
Anytime I could hang out with Michael's just a treat.
And Jay Johnson was on these gigs as well?
No, Jay was not on these gigs. Jay's company was booking these gigs.
Yes, yeah. Either through the Trotline guy, probably.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Music Garden they had their hand in that at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then I moved to St. Louis. Tell Michael that I've moved to St. Louis, and he goes, "Oh, that's where my corporate office is." So his business where he works, they do an event every year where everybody that works there plays in the band.
Oh.
All of his coworkers. Well, they didn't have a drummer, so he hired me to come and play drums with them. Then I met his coworker, and I've started playing with him here. I'm playing a handful of gigs now that we're living here. I'm usually playing drums with them, and I met him through Michael Watson. It's just amazing how he's like been every step of this.
Yeah, it just popped in my head. I didn't know you were a drummer until I met Michael Watson, and he mentioned you playing drums on some gigs. I'm like, what? He's got another talent?
No.
Wow.
No, I just own drums, dude. That's all it is.
And you don't mind carrying them and setting them up. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I don't.
What are you doing Friday?
Yeah, exactly.
The road is winding, but I don't mind it. I ain't the quitting kind. It'll be just like I said. I'm a stubborn thoroughbred, staring down the finish line. Sometimes I'm tired and weary, but don't you worry, everything will be just fine. Dry your eyes and see, this road belongs to me. I ain't the quitting kind. Ain't always easy.
So then, somewhere along the way, you and I met each other. You started playing with Across the Wide, man. And what a treat that was for me to get to play with you.
Yeah,
a lot.
that was Tim Hamilton called me out of the blue one day and says, "Hey man, I'm working with this band called Across the Wide, mostly Forsyth County area, Mark and Jody, and oh yeah, Brad Williams." I said, "I'm in." I don't know those other two losers, but I'm in. Tim and Brad in the same band, yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. Listening to you tell your story of what you were hearing growing up and everything. They kind of had the same path, listening to what kind of music they were listening to, but they just play country music the right way. You know, it's incredible how they just feel it, and they just play it with a lot of heart. Mm-hmm. And from the day I met them, I'm just like, yeah, this is it. And it was the same way with you, man. It was like, I don't understand how I went through all of my life of playing music and had never played with you. And then when I did, it was just like our heartbeat was the same with it. It was great.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I think it happened at the right time. Had we met on some other gig that didn't mean as much, I think I could tell early on, probably within 2 or 3 gigs, that you and Mark and Jody are something special together. And I think that I knew that about you. I don't know how, or because I didn't know Mark or Jody coming into this, and I didn't know that you didn't grow up with them, but at some point early on I figured out that Mark and Jody have been a couple for a long time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I think that I picked up early on, on the fact that you placed a true value in what you had with them, if that makes any sense. So
no, absolutely.
I think I placed value in you placing value on them. Read into it, but I got something out of that, you know. And now, you know, a week or two into playing, you know, let's say 10 gigs in, I'm feeling this brotherhood of these three guys, and now I'm in it. I feel like I'm a part of it, you know.
Yeah.
And that was pretty early on. There was a lot of camaraderie there between you guys, and I think I was welcomed into it with open arms pretty quick. I think you know. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me all the stories you said. Tell me.
No, you're absolutely correct in that. In that, you know, being able to play is, I mean, of course, there's so much importance on that, right? But no drama, no BS. The hang is good. You know, I heard someone say one time, you should never play in a band with someone that you wouldn't ride in the car for 8 hours with. And there's a lot of truth in that. And you know, when I first started playing with those guys, whether intentional or not, they always invited me to ride to the gigs with them. We'd play in like Fayetteville or somewhere that was like an hour away. We'd all meet up and we'd ride in the car together to play these gigs and laugh and tell stories and stuff. And there was so much importance on the personal connection with each other. And then it immediately translated to the chemistry of the music. And yeah, man, I mean, they're just like you, man. You guys are the brothers that I had to wait 40 years to have. And yeah, it's really special to me.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback back on what I was saying before I kind of got off track, but God, I lost my train of thought. What's the next question? I mean, just like that, man. It happens. It totally happens. What was I going to say? I don't know. No,
you were just going to talk about how much you love playing with me, I think is what you were going to say. No, that's not it.
No, that's not it. It was something else. No, well, yes, I do. That is definitely a fact. I mean, now it's made public. Now everybody knows. Great.
Darn it.
Man. Yeah, I think there's something special that I feel it when we play together. I don't know what it is. It's not the amount of notes. It's not, you're not way up here on the, on the neck. Or is that down? I don't know. So, you know what I mean? I mean, it's those milliseconds in between the beats that you'll wait. Don't be in a hurry.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn that, and I still work at things, and I still subconsciously think late and early. But I also know if I'm not thinking of those things, then I'm off the rails. But I do know the value in playing, finding a zone and just sinking in it. But it's taken a long time to get.
What do you look for? As a drummer, what do you like for a bass player to do?
Stand on my hi-hat side.
Yeah.
A lot of bass players say, "Well, why would I do that?" Well, I say, "So you can see my foot."
Yeah, see your foot.
Yeah, I mean that's what it's all about. Those two things, right? No, that's a little exaggeration, but I do ask bass players where if they ask me where am I going to stand, I say right there on my left.
Yeah.
You somebody that listens to. Wow, that's a big question, man. That's somebody that plays feel and time rather than notes. I always say don't play the song. Don't play the bass.
Yeah.
If I want to hear drums, I'll go to a Rush concert. I want to hear guys that play the song. And maybe there's a few things that can happen for movement, but I don't need to hear this stuff on bass. Play the song and play with me.
Yeah, that's it. And
it's pretty simple.
It is, and of course that translates well to the kind of music that we've been talking about with playing traditional country music, because there's a lot of simplicity in that. But I think it transcends that, and it can be said about anything, in that playing to the song, not being a distraction from the lead vocal or the if someone's the lead instrument, if there's a solo, just getting out of the way of all of that is more important. Yeah,
it's definitely supportive role. I mean, you're playing a supportive role. But yeah, I mean, I guess that'd be that's my final answer. Just play with the drummer. If I hit 2 times, maybe most of the time you're probably going to hit 2 times, and pay attention to that stuff. If a pattern changes from verse to chorus, move a little bit with that pattern.
That's
because use these things that are on your head.
Yeah, so when I was in college, this would have been in the 90s, a guy who was a good friend of mine was an incredible bass player and started playing a little bit with Shannon Forrest. He's okay.
I mean, if you like that kind of playing.
Yeah, I remember someone telling me when he had first moved there, they were like, he's the Jeff Porcaro of Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's unbelievable. But my buddy played some gigs with him, and right out of the gate, Shannon was like, I'd love it if your pattern would only be what my kick drum's playing. And you know what? It just kind of stuck with me. And I'm like, you know what? Bass players don't really need to play much more than that. Just play what the drummer's kick pedal is doing, and you'll be okay.
Yeah. And that goes for most styles of music that you and I enjoy, that working musicians at this level play. If it's a Steely Dan cover, it's probably going to be the same rule. If you play Hank Williams, covers, probably going to be the same way.
It's going to probably be the same way.
Pretty simple. I mean, drummers are guilty of things as well, over trying to make it too complex and interesting, and I'm going to blow their minds with, not on this Pat Benatar tune, you're not. Just play the groove, just play time, and, support the girl singing,
Yeah, that's it. That's really it. Yeah, just supporting the vocal. Yeah. That's really it, man.
Yeah. What do you need from it? What do you look for in a drummer?
So it's a good question, and I think there are times where the drummer needs to lead the dance, and there are times where the bass player needs to lead the dance. And I think knowing that push and pull a little bit, where maybe we're going to play on the back of the beat just a little bit on the verse, and we're just going to sit a little bit on the front of it during the chorus. And I just, going back to standing next to your hi-hat, just a good solid subdivision of where that beat is, man, and that's it. So
you want to be over there more for the hi-hat, or is it both?
It's both.
Okay.
I like to feel what the subdivision of the beat is, and then of course, seeing what the foot is doing. Mm-hmm. Especially if we haven't played with each other much, or we're still learning.
Yeah.
Learning. And the other thing I think there's a lot of value in, and is that if a bass player and a drummer have not played together before or much, immediately hanging as soon as you get to the gig, and just kind of find some common ground.
Yeah.
And just kind of feeling some instant brotherhood or brother and sisterhood or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And that once you're on the bandstand, it's gonna be apparent in playing the music together.
Yeah, I think you and I had that. Even though we knew each other, I think we knew each other from afar for 15 years or whatever it might be. It was always, I know Brad Williams. I'll see him and wave and say, how are you? But we had never hung out. And there's no better time to learn than the Georgia-South Carolina rest stop. The first gig we did, I don't know where we hung out, probably around the map section.
Yeah, that's probably it, because there was not a lot of traffic around the map section, thanks to all of our smartphones.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. But that was truly the first time we truly hung out for more than a hello and good to see you kind of thing. But yeah, you're right about that. The hang is super important, but because the bass and drum, they should ride in the back of the van together.
Yeah, that's really it. Yeah, just kind of have that connection before before they're on the bandstand playing
Yeah.
playing tunes together. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and I it helps for the drummer to be handsome like you are. I mean, that's important to me.
Well, I mean, it's tough. Like I said, my 2 older brothers didn't get much of that.
Well, I'm just glad that one of you did.
Man, we beat each other up. I love having brothers. They're so much fun.
Well, Mark, I love you, buddy, and this has just been a complete pleasure, and I appreciate you spending some time looking at my ugly face for a while, and
I've enjoyed looking
you.
at your ugly face for a while. It's been fantastic. No, you're just as handsome as ever, and I love you dearly, and I wish you'd move back. So,
well, kiss Kelly for me, and I love you, and thank you, bud.
love you too, brother.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Bandwidth Tapes. I'm your host, Brad Williams. The show's theme is called Playcation and was written by Mark Mundy. Drop me a line at the email address, thebandwidchtapes@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe to receive new episodes of the podcast. And while you're at it, please tell someone else about the show. Thanks for listening.